everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in with Dave, CEO of Attract Capital, and myself, Janine. We're here to do another webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the 5 tips for great deal structure. Continue to leave comments. We appreciate every feedback that you guys are giving. It really helps us know what you guys are looking for and what else we can offer. So Dave, what is deal structure and how important is it?
Great question, Janine. Deal structure is one of those things that people need to know a little bit more about in order to do really great deals. And deal structure refers to how you paid for the purchase price of the company that you want to buy. And it really refers to the different layers of the purchase price consideration. It's usually the money up front and the money that you pay on the back end of a deal. And it's one of those things that you balance it out by different timing factors. So some of the money you're going to pay immediately when you close, some of it you're going to pay maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, and it enables you to pay more for a company than you otherwise might be able to afford if you were using all of your own cash.
Okay, so it helps you get a little bit more creative in the process when you're designing the structure.
Exactly. I mean, when you look to do a deal, you really have to maximize the amount of deal value you're getting for the money that you're putting in. So that when you look at the different ways to build deal structure, there's usually like 3 or 4 things that you can do. You can come up with a seller note. You can come up with an earnout that'll be performance tested. You could also come up with seller equity, which is money that you'll roll over into the deal. And those are the 3 things that really help you get a robust deal structure and really kind of increases alignment between the buyer and the seller.
So you find that those are some of the key things that you should ensure when designing the structure? Is there anything else you could think of that would help someone?
Well, when you're designing the structure, the key is that you really need to know that you can finance your deal. And so a lot of people, when they go to chase a deal and try to bring the financing into it, they just assume that they can pay a whole lot more up front and that a lender will come along and finance it. So one of the key things is to make sure that you have tested the financeability of the front end portion of your deal before you go down the road, because if you can't get the money from a lender, then it's going to be difficult for you unless you can raise a whole lot of equity. Most of the people that we work with, Janine, are independent buyers, and they're entrepreneurs, and so they don't have deep pockets on their own. And if you don't design the right structure, it could prevent you from getting the deal financed. So it's one of those critical things. People need to look at the cash flows, they need to look at the balance sheet, they need to look at what the seller expectation is, they need to know what the buyer financial resources are, they need to look at it holistically, and they also need to look at it very specifically in order to come up with the most comprehensive approach to the deal structure. And a deal structure that has a good amount of money up front, but then a good amount of money on the back end, where some of it's performance tested and some of it is rollover equity, is usually a great deal structure, and those are the deals that can get financed.
Very nice. So I was looking at the big picture and then the details that go into that as well.
Absolutely.
And so with your clients, your merger and acquisition clients, do you help them design this? Are you
We do. We help them. A lot of our clients come to us and say, we need help designing a deal structure here. We have a general idea of what the company's worth, but we don't want to pay it all out up front. So can you come up with something that will be palatable for our sellers, that will build alignment with our sellers? And so we usually have to look at it, as we just said, and get creative with it, because it really comes down to knowing the tools that you have at your disposal and generally what the market will bear. So a lot of times a seller's broker might say, well, we'll give you a little bit of a seller note, we'll give you maybe 10-15%, but if it's a middle market deal, you really need a bigger seller note in order to have a larger percentage of the deal be back-ended. And the reason it's important to have that back-ended is because if it's back-ended, it's more likely that the lender will say, they'll count that as equity. Because it's all about trying to do a lot with a little if you're buying a company. Because if you're buying a $50 million company, you want to do it you want to come up with a structure that will not impose a huge debt service on the business, and so you want to have some friendly capital on the back end of the deal. And when you have a seller note, or when you have some rollover equity, or if you have an earnout, and an earnout is when if the company continues to perform well over time, then they will get paid additional purchase price. If you have all those ingredients, it makes it less risky for you as a buyer. It makes it less risky for the lender because if the company doesn't perform in line with projections, that money is not going to be paid. So the buyer wins, the lender wins, and the seller understands it because if the seller says, listen, if the company doesn't perform in line with how you think it's going to perform, you're just not going to get the money. So it's kind of like a mutual understanding of how many deals get done in the middle market.
That's a lot of knowledge. Sounds like people need you on their side to help put that all out.
Thank you, Janine. Well, I've been doing it a long time, and one of the keys is if you get the right structure, you can do really big things, such that sometimes you're able to do a deal with no money, equity investment going into the deal.
Oh, wow.
So like it's almost like doing a deal with no money down. The trick to that is you either owning a piece of the company or having some equity value in a business that you're combining with the company you're going to acquire. And in doing so, you don't have, the key is knowing what the lender will finance. If you know what the lender will finance, and if you understand how the other layers need to be arranged in the capital structure, you can create your equity in the deal and go to the lender and say, listen, I'm only putting in, maybe it's a $20 million acquisition. I'm only putting in $1 million in cash, which is only 5%, but I've got a $8 million seller note, and it's not going to pay any principal back over the 5-year period. And I've also got an earnout for another $2 million. So I've got $10 million of junior capital to your loan, and that $10 million that I need from you, Mr. Lender, is only 2 times EBITDA. So will you do that deal? And if you set up the pieces of the structure the right way, you make it very financeable for the lender. If you don't set up the pieces of the structure the right way, it can be an impediment to the lender wanting to make the loan.
So the right pieces. So knowing the right pieces, what would you then put all together as the 5 tips for creating this great deal structure?
So the great deal, now you're putting the pressure on me, Janine. You're putting the pressure on me. The tips for the number 5 for the top 5 tips for the great deal structure is you want to back end at least 30% of the purchase price. If you back end 30% of the purchase price, you're really increasing the financeability of the whole transaction. That's a good rough number that we have come to based on doing hundreds of deals for our clients. So number 5, back end at least 30% of the purchase price. Number 4, make sure the cash portion of the purchase price, the upfront, can be lender financed. You don't want to put more money on the table at closing than you can finance through a lender. So you want to understand what the lenders can do for you, and you want to do that research before you sign the deal with the seller, not after you sign the deal with the seller. That's number 4. Number 3, be creative. Creative with the different levels, the different pieces and the layers that you're going to have. So you don't always need to conform it to a certain set amount of seller note, equity rollover, and earnout. You really need to look at the cash flows. You need to look at the growth rate of the business. You need to look at what the buyer financial resources are and what the seller expectations are. It's almost like a big simultaneous multivariable equation that you have to solve for. So there's some math involved here, and I don't think I could write it.
Do that
I don't think I can write it on a piece of paper, but there's multiple constraints going on at the same time. That if you're thinking about those multiple constraints, you can be creative and you can solve for X. And in solving for X, you'll come up with these different layers, and that'll be a very good thing. So be creative with the layers. That's number 3. Number 4, you want to balance out the structure. You don't want to have too much of it up front. You don't want to have too much of it in the back end. You want to find a happy medium. Number 5, and this is probably the most important, make sure that buyer and seller are aligned with respect to the structure. This buyer has to be able to meet his obligations to the seller, and the seller needs to know what exactly he's looking for so that there's alignment so they can get the deal done and they can move forward constructively in a relationship.
Perfect. Well, there you have it, everyone. Those are 5 solid tips for creating a deal structure. Dave Barnett, Attract Capital, they have your back in this entire process. Keep tuning in. Reach out for more information, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Janine. Take care, everybody.